give us a sense of whether or not things have improved at all, and what do you think the SON's approach this time around will achieve?
Okay, so first of all, let me say I don't think things have improved. I think that there's a fundamental disconnect in our understanding of what is required. So when food products are rejected, we need to carry out a comprehensive study, get a proper understanding of the reasons that that has happened. Is it because of contaminants? Is it because of the way the products were handled? Is it because there are other items within the consignment? What confidence level are we giving that pre-inspection has been carried out, pre-tests have been carried out? If you don't give those confidence levels, there's somebody at the other end whose job is dependent on them getting the entry process right.
Right. But what will the SON's approach this time achieve in your view?
Well, it's early days. Obviously, they've just recently inputted these 800 new regulations or new checks. I think the devil is in the detail. I think we need to understand very clearly how this will be enforced. We need to get feedback from the recipient markets as to whether they think that this is sufficient. So it's not for me to sit here and pontificate over whether it's acceptable to the market or not. The market will decide on whether or not they think this is far enough, far-reaching enough, effective enough to actually secure the food chain in the recipient countries, the recipient markets, wherever they might be. But you know, we will have to wait for feedback, and we'll have to see and be clear that enforcement is being done and that the process is manageable. In other words, you can't just put out regulations. You have to understand that the way these things work is that new rules come in, new standards come in, new contaminants are found, new inputs that are perhaps contaminated or adulterated are coming in from other parts of the world, which could be infecting the value chain. Standards on farms are important. There's a whole raft of things that you need to look at. It's not just you know, new regulations. And let me add, if you look at the way transport happens between farm and the port, or between warehouses and the port, and you look at the row of trucks sitting on the bridge, you know, if you've got a truck full or a container full of products, food products, sitting on the bridge for 3 weeks, it's not going to be in the same condition when it arrives at the port as when it left the farm. So, you know, we need to think about these things. It's not just about regulations or a new booklet.
Yeah.
So earlier in the year, I did have a chat with the Minister for Trade and Investment, and one of the things he highlighted as the key issues at that time was the fact that, of course, what we're discussing now, exportable Nigerian produce are being rejected at the international market. So it is quite understandable that the SON is coming up with these standards at this point in time. But 800, as I said to you earlier, just before the show started, sounds like a list of long things to do. As an operator within the industries, what areas would you expect this 800 standards to cover?
Well, well, first of all, it's encyclopedic. So 800 is a huge number. It's a lot to get through. But then, given where we're coming from, perhaps it's understandable we're playing catch-up. But my expectation is that this will look at plant health to begin with. So what is the state of plants, where the food is actually originating from? It should look at the inputs, you know, the crop protection, chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides. It should also address issues of handling, hygiene on farms. You know, what are the regulations for keeping farms protected? What are the packaging materials that are used? Are there any contaminants? What are the processing methods that are being used? Does that have any contaminants? What is the handling methodology? What is the transport methodology? What is the transit time between the between the farm and the market? Because that has an effect. Every food product has a shelf life. And, you know, the more you reduce that shelf life, the more you reduce marketability, but you also affect the integrity and the quality of the product. So my expectation is that if we have 800, it probably covers everything.
Right. But let's speak to the typical agri-entrepreneur right now in Nigeria, because we know that has become a very interesting area over the last few years. But would you say that it's the knowledge required of the global standards is something that they can on their own find out and do their best to organize the way that they're exporting these products? Perhaps the only way to achieve that is to export by air. But your perspective on that entrepreneur who has considered exports as an opportunity and it's now beginning to hear things like Nigeria's products are banned. There's a spotlight on Nigerian products. Do you get a sense that they can still overcome those challenges?
Well, yes, but it's not an overnight process. So first of all, there's a dichotomy between where the food is produced and where it's consumed. And already, I have to tell you, there's a big enough internal market in Nigeria for you to earn enough profit to improve your standards on the farm. So back to the entrepreneur. So you have a number of different types of farmers. You have, what we generally call here the subsistence farmers. So the ones who are largely poor, uneducated, illiterate in some instances, but probably the most hardworking. So we shouldn't look down on them. Then you've got the new, what I call the new breed, so who are the people who are coming in, they're professionals, they're investing in farms, and have a little bit of more of an understanding. But they've got a challenge as well in terms of, farm handling, mechanization, scale. They've got a few issues that they need to contend with. And then you've got the corporate farmers. Okay, the corporate farmers are the large corporations who seem to understand what needs to be done because they employ the best minds to help them do that. In terms of communicating this information to the lowest level, i.e. the subsistence hand-to-mouth farmer, it's not impossible. Many farmers across the world sit in that category. It's not just in Nigeria. But what happens is that government, through various instruments, is able to create standards for those farmers and able to communicate with them in a language that they understand so that they can produce to a standard that is acceptable. The guys in the middle, the entrepreneur that you talk about, the guy in the shirt and the tie who really has a passion for farming, well, they understand, but they can't scale. They can't get the scale. So there's room there for some aggregators and other entrepreneurs who actually gather the produce together. As I said, the large corporations are looking for a business environment that's favorable. Today it's probably Kenya, possibly Ethiopia, unlikely to be Nigeria, given some of the challenges that we're facing here.
We'll wait to see what enforcement of the standards, 800 standards, will be like for the industry. Thank you very much.
Sounds like a lot.